Okay, what should we talk about today? I got one for you. Let's talk about Napa. And hello, and how are you today, by the way? Napa, what is Napa? Napa Valley. This is a region of California. It's kind of mostly north of San Francisco. We'll throw a map up here. Let's stick it over there. Yeah, let's put it on this side. A little more space over here. Okay, Napa, Northern California. This is a region that has become very, very well known for its wine, and is probably one of the most ideal growing locations for grapes in the world. The climate is, you can almost set your watch by it. It's so consistent. It's hot, dry days, and you have your cool, foggy nights. It's the soil conditions are ideal for grapes. The water, it doesn't rain that much, but it gives enough moisture for them. It's just grape growers perfection. I mean, you couldn't get any more perfect for it. Now, what does that mean in terms of grapes? Well, in terms of wine. Well, it does tie back to the grapes, because if you've got good, consistent conditions for growing grapes and they do well, it's ideal conditions, then you're going to get some very consistent wines through the years. And this has kind of been the hallmark of Napa. It's like you always can get good grapes out of it. It's not like other areas. France, for example, has its good years and its bad years. It's like, 2007, fantastic year, one of the best of the century for wine out of France. Well, you don't hear that about Napa very often. It's sometimes I suppose they would have some that are better than others, but it's not the extremes. You don't have a bad year followed by a really, really good year, or you don't have a couple good years in a row followed by a bunch of bad years or mediocre years. Napa has a very consistent climate, very consistent growing conditions, and therefore makes very consistent wines. So when you're talking about Napa, what are we really talking about? Okay, let's if we look at the map of Napa, and I'll throw it up there someplace, you can see that it is a valley. It's between mountains, two mountain ranges, so you've got that area in between where the grapes are grown. Now, of course, the grapes are grown part way up the mountains. You get a little bit more elevation there, and that does affect the grapes themselves, the conditions in which they're grown. Higher up, a little bit cooler, a little bit drier. Things like that. Those affect the grapes and therefore the wine. But Napa itself is probably on average 2 to 3 miles across, and some places more narrow, some places a wider. And the length, depending on where you start from and where you finish at, is any place from probably 30 to 50 miles long. So it's not a huge region, but yet they crank out a lot of juice in those areas, which they turn into a lot of wine. Now, Napa Valley has become very well known throughout the world for its quality of wine, and that has affected the price of it. It's you're probably going to pay more for a bottle of Napa wine than you would for something very, very comparable in taste and everything from a different region. And that's just, you're paying partly for the name. It's just you go to the store and you buy a can of Green Giant green beans or something, you're going to pay for more for those than you would if you bought the store brand, which may be just as good, just as tasty, but it's just not got that name on it, that seal of approval, that stamp, as it were. Okay, so anyway, Napa wines. They are, for the most part, very good wines. You're going to have good and bad any place. You may prefer a style of this vintner here over this other vintner, and that's a personal taste. Not to say that either one is bad, but they're going to be different. So if compare your grandma's apple pie with your mom's apple pie, they're going to be a little bit different. The people making them have some impact on it. It's not just the grapes and where they're grown, but the people who make the wine as well. So what are we talking about in terms of varietals? Well, Napa Valley does have a wide range of varietals, but there's two in particular it's very well known for. And those two, are Cabernet Sauvignon on the red side and Chardonnay on the white side. Now, with your Cab Sav, Cabernet Sauvignon, you're going to find some typical characteristics. They're going to be very big and bold. What do I mean by big and bold? It means you take a sip, which happen to have a glass of wine here. This is not Napa. I will disclaim that. This is another wine, but didn't have any open and handy, so I'm drinking what I got. All right, so big and bold, you take a sip or even take a whiff on the nose, and you're going to smell a lot if you're smelling it. Then you take that first sip, and your mouth is going to be full of flavor. Now, Napa Reds, Cab Savs in particular, were very well known for being very heavily oaked. Initially, they have cut that back some and done some changes to it over the years, but initially, all the oak that they used was American oak. And of course, I'm talking the barrels made from American oak. Now, does it matter where the oak is grown? Yes and no, just like anything else, terroir. But when we're talking American oak, we're talking a different species or cultivar of the oak tree. You know, you've got the oak trees that have the big red bright leaves, and you got other oak trees that the leaves in the fall stay kind of brown. Two different types of oak trees. The oaks that are used in the U.S. for making barrels come mostly from the Missouri area, if that means anything to you. And it is a particular type of oak tree. I don't know the name of it right offhand, but it's got a much more open grain to it. And again, by that one, you saw lengthwise a board or a piece of oak. You see it's kind of whiter grain to it, and there is a grain to wood. Now, contrast that with a French oak, which is a different varietal of oak tree. And it's got a very fine grain, very compressed, very tight. So that gives a different flavor to the wines. So initially, pretty much all the wine coming from Napa Valley was made with American oak, which gives you a very, very tannic flavor. Big, in your face, in your mouth, tannic flavor, along with the big, bold grapes of Cabernet Sauvignon. So it was all about being big and all about being in your face, flavorful. So that's that's kind of how it started out. And in later years, there has been some tempering to that. The tannin level is coming down, being a little bit more softened up. You're finding a lot of vineyards there or winemakers going half French oak, half American oak, or some percentage that way, 25-75. And that kind of tones it down. There's some other techniques that they've started using with egg whites and such that take away some of that really heavy tannin taste from the American oak. Some people like that, and that's fine. I didn't initially care for it. I've kind of gotten used to it and don't mind it now. But it's something to be aware of. Now, this also moves price up because anytime you're using oak barrels and the quantity they use them, then it's going to cost. There's little cheats and ways around that, but you're getting that new American oak is going to give you that strong flavor, but of course, if you're using new oak all the time, that means you only use the barrels once. So that adds to the cost, adds to the process, but it also adds to the flavor. Now, along the same line, you've got the Chardonnay, which is another big one in the Napa Valley region. Chardonnays also are made with oak, or can be. They don't always have to be. But fermented in the oak barrels and or aged in the oak barrels, you get that big buttery taste. California Chardonnays are known for the buttery taste to it. You take a sip of that, and of course it's a white, and it's almost like drinking popcorn at the movie theater. You know, it's just that buttery taste. Some people really enjoy that. Again, I personally don't care for it. I'm not a big Chardonnay fan for that reason. Even when you're not going all big and bold and buttery in your face, Chardonnay has a taste I don't care for as much. Again, personal preference. You may love it. A lot of people do. So, Napa Valley, known for two wines in particular, the Cabernet Sauvignon with a big oak flavor and the heavily oaked Chardonnays. So something to experience if you haven't already. I definitely recommend you give them a try. They're tend to be a little bit more expensive, but they're not out of price or out of region in terms of price. You get a really good Chardonnay or Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa for probably about 2 to 3 tickets, going back to the ticket system if you remember that. So anyway, I hope you give them a try if you haven't tried them already. And if you have tried them or try them, leave me some comments down below. Tell me what you think about Napa Valley wines. I know they're popular with a lot of people, and especially in the U.S. because it's so easy to get to. So anyway, you enjoy your wines and try the Napas and let me know what you think. Also, I'd be interested to know what you think about the little wine quotes I have at the end of the videos. So leave me some comments on those too. Thanks, enjoy your wine, and cheers. And then, the next thing I'd like to look at in Australia is if you want to get a grape in a bottle, obviously wine, to me their signature one is Shiraz. If you want the best Shiraz in the world, you go to Australia and get it.